separate from nature, whether that's inner nature or outer nature, like that people see themselves as isolated, alienated individuals, that they're making their own luck in the world and live sort of in a world extracted from meaning or devoid of meaning, that kind of stuff. And it's placed me in a point where I've had to open myself up to different ideas. I imagine if you and I talked about institutions...
I seem a spiritual person, but not literally, and that's totally true. I'm in as much awe at seeing a tree or a mountain or a bird or a river as anyone who thinks God made it.
What Ricky is describing here as spirituality is simply being empathetic. Having empathy for something is not spirituality. I was talking to a religious relative of mine, and her remark to me about my finding as much joy in existence as any religious person does was, "Oh, you're just like my son. You're one of those spiritual people." I told her no, spirits do not exist. She responded, "That's not what I mean." "You know what I mean." I said, "You're talking about a soul. You're the spiritual one. What do you think you're talking about when you talk about souls and ghosts? Those are what are called spirits. So no, I am not the one that is spiritual. Just very empathetic."
I think there's so many myths about atheism. We can go into the definitions and all that, but I think it's worse. People think that atheists run into churches and ruin people's days. You know?
Unfortunately, I know of at least one atheist that did that. He would go into the church parking lot and leave little notes telling the parishioners that their God doesn't exist. One Sunday he went up there and the cops were waiting for him. He stopped doing that. How some Christians have the nerve to cry about that is what makes them hypocrites. I had been riding the train when some Christian, Bible in hand, walked up and down the car yelling scripture. I've been at a bus station where Christians carrying a microphone and speakers, Bible in hand, are yelling scripture. I've been walking down the street and been accosted uncountable times by Christians who wanted to yell scripture at me. The United States government is a religion-free zone. Can't tell how many rampages Christians go on when God was taken out of the court system, when their goal was to get their religion taught in public schools alongside evolution, a ridiculous thing they refer to as a textbook called Of Pandas and People. My response to them is, if they can't take it, then keep it to yourselves.
No one knows. If we agree that no one knows.
Yes, I and several other people do know, because I am the one that proved gods do not exist. Don't believe me? Watch my video, The Argument from a Disconnect to Reality, or Yahweh Allah Doesn't Exist, down in the description below. So yes, it is known, and we just need to spread the word.
We're all atheists, so now what do you think?
We are not, unfortunately, all atheists. Atheists do not believe gods exist. The A in atheist means not. We are not theists. Theists believe gods do exist. If someone believes leprechauns exist, they are a leprechaunist. If someone does not believe leprechauns exist, they are a leprechaunist. An agnostic can be theist or atheist.
A good Christian or a good Muslim or a good Jew or whatever is someone who does all the good bits in that holy book and ignores the bad bits.
This reminds me of a story. I was debating an evil piece of depravity on YouTube that called itself Thea Warner. It also called itself a Roman Catholic. I stated that the story of Abraham and Isaac is informing Jews, Christians, and Muslims that if the God orders you to do something, in this case, murder your own child, you are to do it without remorse, because nothing is more important in your life than this God of yours. He informed me that he would murder his own child if his God ordered him to, because it's God's mind, it's epistemology. It's too above him to comprehend. Therefore, he will follow his God's orders. You know, there's a reason, a plan for anything his God does or orders. I told him he is no different than the Nazis claiming they were just following Hitler's orders to escape their culpability in the atrocities they committed. He called me immoral for likening him to a Nazi. He went on with the soldier theme to exclaim that Christians, Roman Catholics, are soldiers in his God's army, and asked me, so what? Are soldiers not supposed to follow any orders? In order to murder his own child is no more noteworthy, no more significant than in order to tie his own shoe. What you have called the bad bits in these religions are simply the bits of these religions, which every Jew, Christian, and Muslim must affirm as bad, as evidenced by Thea Warner. That cannot happen.
And, we know that the bad believers are the ones that do the bad bits too.
There is no such thing as a bad believer or a good believer. If a Jew, Christian, or Muslim tells you that they would not murder a homosexual, throw a homosexual off a building, they are simply non-believers, period, as their God. The God's rule is to worship it or suffer, accept it or suffer, believe or suffer. There is no in between. You are a believer or you are an atheist. Atheist claiming agnosticism when it comes to God is simply a non-believer. An atheist, hell-bound.
Morality is relative and not absolute.
Morality is not relative, it is indeed absolute. Nature informs us of this. Contrary to popular belief, wolves do not eat their own young. What we humans call morality is simply what things are. It is not a mysterious thing we and elephants must be informed of. Murder, hate, slavery are outcomes of natural selection, finite resources. If murder is evil, then it is evil. It cannot both be evil and not evil, any more than a rock can be a rock and not a rock.
There is an unaddressed yearning for a kind of oneness, togetherness. What I feel like, and my own appreciation, understanding, stroke, belief in God is that there is a kind of, in the love of it, in the awareness of rightness itself, there is an indication that there is such a thing as rightness.
There indeed is. All animals practice it.
I also think, Ricky, that there is a social consequence to, I don't necessarily want to say atheism, because I completely agree with your point that there's good and bad, you know, in like beyond those kind of limited taxonomies. But like, I do feel like when people think there's no purpose or meaning, that and that needn't necessarily be just because of a belief in God, that it creates cultures that are oddly materialistic, nihilistic. And I feel like in the last 20 years, we're seeing more and more worship of self, worship of individual.
I don't necessarily want to say atheism, but you just did. To assert that the untrue supposition that meaning doesn't exist, if you are bereft of God, is, I assure you, limited to the superstitious. Atheism breeds nihilism. Tell that to the Christians, Muslims, and Jews, awaiting the end of the world, awaiting the systematic butchering of everyone but them. As for materialism, tell that to these religions when they are passing around the collection plate. Walk into a church, you could feed 8 billion kids for a year with all the wealth on display. The United States, quite possibly the most religious state on the earth, has taken materialism to the nth degree. Great Britain has a state religion. The empire was not to spread the wealth. You acknowledge, as Ricky said, that there is good and bad in all. So please do not claim that a particular belief or lack thereof produces what humans produce.
Of course, there's a new narcissism.
Narcissism is nothing new. The religious worship narcissism. Their God is the most narcissistic thing they have dreamt into existence. It breeds humans to slavishly acknowledge it, and that they are all the specially chosen while the rest are doomed.
People crave a oneness, even if we don't go about understanding about why we're here, because again, that's very human. We're inquisitive. We want to know why. We want the answer why.
Why are we here? To live. Ricky will expand upon that later in the video. What is our purpose? To stay alive equals have children, be immortal.
Why are we here? And some people don't accept. Well, we don't know yet, but we're on the way. They got no. Well, that's no. You know, the God of the gaps. We understand that. Well, if you don't know, explain it. God did it. Okay, well, it doesn't really solve anything.
The religious want meaning. They posited God as the fulfillment of meaning. I have always asked how God contributes meaning. The answer I get is through our worship. What is the worship for? Why does your God need your worship? Is it lonely? They say no, God needs nothing. So then your worship is nothing to this God. It's meaningless. So how do you get meaning from performing a meaningless gesture? They can never answer.
Hold on. Well, it's too good. It's too good to be chance. Everything's perfect. Well, it seems that way. You know, it's like Douglas Adams' puddle. You know, when it imagines this, I fit this hole perfectly.
It is too good to be chance. That's why it is not. The laws of physics govern the creation of all you see. Science has revealed all the processes that made existence what we behold today. Mix gravity, chemistry, etc. together, and you get this. The odds of existence being what we see was 100%. It is impossible for existence to be in any other form.
Well, we are here. We are here. The chances of us being us, you being you and me being me, existing now, that sperm hitting that egg is 400 trillion to 1. You know, we're not special, but we are lucky. We do it.
The odds of you being here is not 400 trillion to 1. It is 100% because you are here. It is impossible for you not to be here. You are attempting. To take odds on a football game that ended last week, odds no longer exist and never did in the case of your existence.
And what science keeps saying, and some people say this is a flaw, but it's been wrong before. Well, science never been wrong before.
People that assert science has been wrong simply do not understand science, do not know what science is. It is literally impossible for science to be wrong. That is the equivalent of stating that a hammer or a screwdriver can be wrong. A carpenter can hammer a nail in wrong. A scientist can mess up his experiment, but science cannot be wrong. Theists go on relentlessly about things such as the Piltdown Man. It was suspected by many to be a fraud perpetrated by its discoverer from the beginning, but people, other scientists, were refused access to it by the perpetrators for decades. When access was gained, due to the natural deaths of all the perpetrators, science revealed it a hoax. Not only that, but it was discovered that the instigator of the hoax had perpetrated many other frauds in the past. His name is now a disgrace in the scientific community.
And what science says, it keeps saying, okay, this is the least wrong theory we've got so far. And then the next day it goes, okay, we're even less wrong today.
This is not completely accurate. Isaac Newton noticed that things that fall to the ground and don't shoot off into space. He hypothesized that there was a force that was pulling things to the ground. To say God caused it is a supposition. A hypothesis requires an observation. He observed things falling. To posit a God requires observing a being causing things to fall. You can then hypothesize that that is a God. Years later, Albert Einstein proved Newton's hypothesis to be true. Einstein explained gravity, how it works, where it is, etc. Newton's hypothesis became a theory. A theory is simply a container that holds the evidence that proves a hypothesis. The word theory means evidence. Evidence equals truth. We know Newton's hypothesis is true because we have the theory, evidence, that gravity exists. To exclaim this is the least wrong theory we've got so far is to assert that theory falls into the category of supposition, conjecture, and guesswork. It does not. Those are the domain of religion.
My new show, Supernatural, I start with saying it's called Supernatural for two reasons. One, I want to debunk the supernatural. I don't believe in anything supernatural.
It is good that you do not believe the supernatural exists, because it doesn't. We must ask ourselves, what are the properties of the existence we inhabit at this very moment? We arrive at three possible choices. 1, a place where nothing can happen. 2, a place where only some things can happen. Or 3, a place where anything can happen. To determine which one of those possibilities is the place in which you dwell, you must test each in turn scientifically. Use your hand to pick something up. You have just determined that you do not dwell in an existence where nothing is possible, as well as having determined that you at least live in an existence where some things are possible, because you just picked something up. Now you must test if you inhabit an existence where anything is possible. Our test will be the ability to teleport to the Red Sea, and as Moses did, part it, divide it in two with a wave of your hand. Take the time now to teleport yourself to the Red Sea and part it with a wave of your hand. You will discover that you cannot, and you have concurrently discovered that you do not inhabit an existence where anything is possible. If you inhabit an existence where some things are possible, picking up a pencil, if something you cannot accomplish in that existence, parting the Red Sea with a wave of your hand, becomes possible, then the existence you inhabit is an existence where anything is possible. But as our Red Sea test has confirmed, we do not live in an existence where anything is possible, and that would be the existence we inhabit if there were a creature that could part the Red Sea with a wave of its hand. If anything were possible, anyone or anything, grass, chairs, leprechauns, lions, or fingernail, could teleport itself to the Red Sea and part it with a wave of its hand if it so desired. For a supernatural creature that can part the Red Sea on a whim to exist, the ability for a creature that can part the Red Sea on a whim must exist for a creature to be able to come into existence that can part the Red Sea on a whim. The supernatural must exist independently of the creature. The creature cannot invent the supernatural after it has come into existence. Reality, the very fabric of existence itself, must be conducive to such feats. And the scientific test you just attempted, parting the Red Sea, confirms it is not. This dictates that it is impossible for a creature that can accomplish the impossible, supernatural feats, to exist. No gods, deist or otherwise. This also confirms that the reality you are able to measure, note, observe, the natural world, does exist and is the only existence there is, as we have demonstrated that the supernatural world does not exist.
We don't need angels and unicorns. We've got the fucking octopus.
I don't see like quantum physics as woo type magic, but I do see it as an indication of fucking hell. There is an intelligence at work.
And I'm afraid, Russell, you do see it as woo.
Uncertainty principle. The fact that I want it to be metaphor. I want it to go. We don't literally mean it's in two places at once. I go, yeah, we do, because the way that times.
Actually, they don't mean it can be in two places at once, because it is impossible for something to be in two places at once. That would require the existence of the supernatural, anything being possible, and it's not.
Okay.
Yes, because will is like, you know, if, as much as I can understand it, strongly related to my individual imperatives, which are based on survival, which are therefore material: need to procreate, need to have food, need to have shelter, need to die. So will, however it might refract through a culture that no longer requires of me that I seek shelter or find food, you know, like all culture is coming from this place. And I think when we're talking about the absolute, whether we're talking about it in sort of materialistic scientific terms or spiritual or even religious terms, it's not going to be something that we can comprehend and understand. And I've always used that as a kind of rebuttal to the idea of why do bad things happen, because I feel like we are on such a narrow bandwidth of all potential realities, of all potential understandable forms and unforms, that our notions of good and bad are inhibited. We are beyond that.
Yes.
You're correct. All things are based on material needs. All societies are formulated around the gathering of materials. It is the necessity of life. Your problem, unlike a wolf, is to wonder why it is so. Your burden is sentient, because it is simply evolution. All living things survive off the corpses of those that have come before, those they kill or that which has died. Bad things happen to certain people, animals, plants, because nature has no concern for you. The earth is not in the throes of figuring out how to keep you alive. The only oneness that exists between you and a cat or a blade of grass, whilst on your acid trip, is the DNA you share in common. Some people murder, some don't. It simply is. The fact that we know murder is wrong is due to the fact that the majority does not engage in it. Likewise, our fellow creatures, we all kill or are ready to, though. That is all that we need to understand. Come in tune with your simian, bovine, feline, flora brethren. Stop thinking about something that your answers only propagate superstition for. Face reality. Or does that lead to nihilistic thoughts for you? The religious claim, to me on multiple occasions, that if there were no God, they would be out plundering, murdering, and raping. And then ask me why I'm not doing that, as I do not believe in a God. I have a suggestion for you, religious. Rape, torture, murder, and kill yourselves first, or keep your deplorable nihilistic appetites in your churches until we sane can come up with a better place to lock you savages up.
There are different laws for different times and different species. You know, the law of the spider is not the same as the law as the human. We know that. If I'm starving, I don't eat my own legs. And when we mate, we don't bite the head of the partner afterwards. So it's a nonsense to try and equate a morality with nature.
There aren't. You are equivocating laws with morality. Morality is applicable universally. Different for different times asserts that slavery was good, period. That stoning a woman to death for being raped, as the Judeo-Christian Islamic God instructs, is just, period. If the God says it is just, then it is just. The Judeo-Christian Islamic person's mantra, period. Anyone can come up with any law, most likely a law that props up themselves. That is why the king has been abandoned. God and secularism predominates in the West. That is why the separation of church and state exists, because the religious have confirmed that their religious laws are those of the savage. They have reverted to secular law, my law, the law of the atheist. They are hypocrites. They are those that have abandoned their God for a human edict. They are the ones destined for their hell. We atheists, as the minority, did not enact the separation of church and state. For them to so callously condemn us is to laugh in their faces. The law of the spider may not be the same as the law of the human, but the law of the human is unconditionally the same as the law of the spider. This is demonstrated. The Donner Party, the Andes plane crash carrying the Uruguayan Old Christians rugby team, all that resorted to cannibalism in the face of starvation. They did not eat their own legs, but what they did is wholly synonymous, as humans have cannibalized each other after death of a comrade as well as through hunting. Archaeology demonstrates this, so does modern reporting. Have you ever witnessed wolves mating? Dogs, when they mate, they become attached, stuck to each other. It ensures insemination of the female. Pregnancy. It is simply how canines mate. Spiders and a plethora of other insects have similar requirements. There are many species of the arachnid referred to as a black widow, which you could refer to as ethnic groups. Not all devour their mate. In point of fact, in the species that does, the male as he is mating will flip himself up into the jaws of the female to be devoured. There are reasons for this, but I won't go into them. But he is ensuring that he will be the one to pass on his genes. A male lion will kill a female lion's mate and the offspring they produced to bring her into estrus so that he can mate with her and pass on his genes. Humans have been murdering their mates since humans started mating. Immortality. The fact that you are sentient, aware, and have a sense of morality, ethics, prohibits you from acting the same way. What it comes down to is that sentience separates us from the instinctual nature of the beast, yet we are still driven subconsciously by instinct equals materialism. It is inescapable.
Morality existed before any God, in my opinion.
If morality exists without a God, then it is absolute, not subjective, and applies to any and all.
And they just took the golden rule, which I love, but it's not religions that, do as you would be done by. And I think it's a really good rule of thumb, and if everyone did that, the world would instantly be a better place.
Ricky mentions the golden rule as something we should abide by. The golden rule, though, is one of the most horrendous pieces of advice you could ever follow. It literally states that if you want someone to rape you, then you can go rape them. You can do anything you wish to them as long as you wish they do it to you. Not words to live by.
And the other one that I've come to love, probably my favourite piece from the Bible that everyone's forgotten, and I see it more and more in the last 10, 15 years, and particularly on social media, is let those amongst you who is without sin cast the first stone.
Let he who is without sin cast the first stone. That God should take its own advice. We know of all the depraved things this God has done, yet it presumes to judge us. As Theo Warner would say, its epistemology is too above us to comprehend. It can do anything it wants. We are just peons suffering at its whims. We deserve to suffer, to die, to be tortured. We are shit beneath its heel to be avoided. Nothing else. Nothing matters without God's approval. I am trash, only worthy of contempt, because God said so. My children are less than waste, with a reservation for none but scorn and torture. That is what I believe, because my God said so. Nothing in existence is worth anything save God, because God said so. Nothing in existence has meaning save God. Not life, not my children, not my wife, not my mother, not love, not me. It is all for the capricious whims of the Almighty. I do not value anything. I do not love anything. I would not weep for anything save God, my Lord and Master. That is why if God did not exist, the first thing I would do is to go on a rape and murder spree, starting with my family. Nihilism incarnate.
Despite what people think of me, I'm not a very judgmental person in my private life. I go, whatever, I even try and empathise with what you call bad people. I think, well, why do they do that? I'm always willing to. I'd be a judge going, promise you won't do it again.
Then you would make a bad judge, my friend. Just kidding. Some things go against the laws of animal nature. Infanticide, murder, genocide, rape, pedophilia, incest. Categorically evil, period. For none wishes such a thing to overtake them. Homosexuality, not evil. Homosexuality, although going against the laws of nature, if homosexuality were the test, life would not exist, occurs in nature, making it natural. Why is it not evil? Homosexuality is consensual. If the definition of homosexuality was rape, then it would be evil. For we are aware that all species of female fight against such an outcome, and the majority of males of all species abhor the thought and do not engage in such aberrant behavior. So we are sure that homosexuality is as genuine as heterosexuality in the sense that it is as benign. So, to relegate crime to not a crime, probably she won't do it again, is to state that crime does not exist. For someone to state that you can't judge me is to state that I must commit their crime, that I must be in tune with their evil, as evil is not subjective but objective. Their rebuttal is that of the guilty, as nature itself dictates that infanticide is evil. I need not commit infanticide to know if they are guilty of evil.
And what about, though, secularism is some degree underwritten by economic ideologies and I would say sort of social systems that in a way behave precisely as religions do, in that they inhibit.
This, as Ricky will expand upon, is untrue. To state that secularism is synonymous to the practices of religion is simply to state that religion is separate from human limitations, that our human systems, ideologies do not encompass humanity, that religion was indeed created by an entity independent of our thoughts. Natural law places inhibitions upon human endeavor, not secularism, as religion demonstrates by imposing law. In the age of today, secular law, as you have described it, Russell.
On an exam, with biology, physics, and chemistry, the answer isn't God did it. That's all. That's all a secular society insists. This works. Biology works. Physics works. It works over and over again.
Or, in other words, all the discoveries of science contradict all your proffered scriptures. Everything you have claimed your God has done is categorically denied by science. Science has not agreed with a single thing you people have ever forwarded, with anything your Bible has ever said. I was debating a Roman Catholic Christian by the name of Theo Warner. I informed him that as a Christian he must believe in and worship baby murder. He told me this was not true. I told him that that is what the story of the murder of all the firstborn of Egypt dictates. He told me that that never happened. He told me that there was no scientific evidence that it had ever occurred. I informed him that that means he does not believe his God exists. He asked me how. I told him that he asserts something didn't happen that his God says did. He agreed and accepted that he believes in and worships baby murder. There has never been and will never be any scientific evidence that anything in your religion is true, because it is all false, evil, superstitious, trash. This Theo Warner went on to claim that atheists should be able to create an algorithm similar to software that no matter what data you enter about the natural world, it will always return the answer that God does not exist. When I informed him that that algorithm software was science, he shut up.
But people said, if you could, would you ban religion? I go, no, I honestly wouldn't.
I would ban religions, philosophies that espouse evil, bullying, belittlement, abuse of power, hate, psychological torture, physical torture, racism, sexism, rape, infanticide, slavery, human sacrifice, homosexual genocide, depravity, all of which are encompassed within the detriments to humanity known as Judaism, Christianity, and Islam.
People said, if you could, would you ban religion? I go, no, I honestly wouldn't. I honestly wouldn't ban religion. In fact, if someone started banning someone the right to believe in whatever God, I'd march going, let them believe in that God. It's your right to believe in whatever. Honestly, I'd fight for anyone's right to believe in God, goblins, witches, just don't throw homosexuals off buildings and we're fine.
To state that you would not ban a religion, that you would march for that religion until they started throwing homosexuals off buildings, is to state that you would not march for that religion. To state that you would ban it, to create laws that would nullify its and its practitioners' predilections. Let us not mince words. You are more than willing, as I am, to ban evil.